Welcome to Vega Vodcast, brought to you by Vega Cloud. I'm Stephen Melton, and this week's host, I'm fortunate to be joined by Lee Wagner from OpenOps. We'll be speaking on what has OpenOps been up to, as well as how they're impacting the FinOps space. We host these very regularly with the who's who in FinOps, and if you like the content of the video, please like and subscribe. Lee Wagner, thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me.
I do like to always start, just kind of a little bit of a fun icebreaker, but just always curious to get folks' angle. What was your favorite / first cool tech toy as a kid? It doesn't have to be like on your short list, maybe. When you think back as when you were a kid, like what was the first cool fun? Doesn't have to be software. Could be hardware. Could be both. I've got a few, but
So the handheld Sega, it has to
okay,
be like that was once you started playing the racing games and Double
yeah,
Dragon in color.
yes,
Oh,
yeah.
oh. Streets of Rage in color. Oh yes.
Mine was so I'll go with that theme as well. It was the state. It was definitely the console.
Yeah.
My buddy, I didn't have one. Wasn't that cool, but my buddy had one, and so we definitely we worked the console pretty good. It was a lot of fun, but for sure, yeah,
hmm
those are some good ones. Now that's good. All right, so that's a good theme.
Although even I remember before that there was the Amstrad writing. There was the game Chucky Egg, and then there was even games that you could write yourself, where you would do like the 10, 20, do this, 30, do this, and you would write these little games yourself. Just like really old school.
That's
God, I
yeah,
feel that old.
bleeding. That was bleeding cutting edge. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're talking about OpenOps. So again, obviously, fortunately, it's been fun to see some of your guys' story more recently. You're more recent to OpenOps. So one, it'd be great to hear a bit of your story in the context of a bit of your background. Obviously, in our work and just prior and knowing in the FinOps space. But then tell us a bit about yourself coming to OpenOps. And really kind of in the story of workflow automation, right? How does it fit? Kind of some of those pieces I think would be really helpful for folks that don't already know, although obviously there's been a lot of buzz.
Sure. Um, Great that there's been a lot of buzz. It means that I'm doing my job well, so that's good. Me, the marketing team, so that's good. Yeah. So background about myself: I've been in FinOps now for around 13 years. So I was originally with CloudIn, that was really one of the first round of visibility tools, and eventually sold to Microsoft, and is still effectively the Azure cost management tool today. And then I was in the early stages at the team at Spot, which later sold to NetApp, and then again in the early team at Zesty. Another interesting software vendor in the space before joining Strategic Blue and Zebia. And after that, I actually had my own consultancy around FinOps tooling and FinOps automations. And once I saw what OpenOps were doing, I really couldn't help but want to join them. I actually originally joined as a strategic advisor, and then it led me into this go-to-market role. And there was just, I've been so excited about it because I think that we solve a slightly different question to those that have been asked over the past few years, which is the what now. It's really kind of taking things on from visibility and context around what you're spending and how you're spending it into what now. What do we do about this? How do we automate this? How do we, and again, it leads into this conversation around workflow automations and really building best practices around what now.
So you kind of alluded to it, right? One of the questions I had was thinking about, okay, what's broken or in the current state of FinOps tooling? I think that I've certainly historically in times heard well, what do we do now? Right. I think that's good. Maybe talk about the visibility to action. So what exactly does that next step from the what's now mean from your workflow perspective?
So I think up until now, there's a lot of tools out there that have given visibility into spend, and it was always, for the first few years of FinOps becoming a word and a thing. It was always visibility. We need to understand the numbers before we can do anything about it. And then it's progressed on to the engineers. We need to get engineers to take action, and how do we do that, and how do we give them context and all this kind of stuff. And really now it's moved on to places around, okay, what can we automate, what do we what can we actually, what's our risk appetite for automation, what's our, how do we look at these low hanging fruits and actually automate the remediation of them, how do we create policy around it, and again automate those so that we're making sure there's less human error, or there's more ways that you can bring humans into the loop. But ultimately, we're asking humans to do more and more, and so automating some of these processes with humans in the loop can become very, very powerful.
Interesting. What talking about
Uh,
timeline, talking about, I'm curious, just timeline wise, what do you
mm.
see current state as to, let's say, within the next 6 to 12 months? What is from an impact perspective? What does that potentially look like?
In terms of things like workflow automation, yeah, so I think it depends on adoption. Obviously, the interesting thing around automation in general is it really depends on an organization's um, risk appetite largely. And what I mean by that is that, in certain ways you could, if you wanted to, in certain teams, in certain environments, you could auto remediate things like GP2 to GP3, or deleting unattached disks, or, various different things. But again, in certain environments, you're just not going to do that, or you're just not comfortable to do that, or you just don't have the risk appetite to do that because of the implications that will happen beyond it. So again, it's really about trying to sort of map out across the organization places where you feel comfortable to do this, places, organizations, like dev environments. You can also, and the beauty of OpenOps is that, so what we're doing is we're building a place where you can build out those best practices, and then you can follow the hub and spoke model. So you have a centralized team that will build out a best practice as you see fit, and then you share it to other users in the org that can basically subscribe to it. But then what's really slightly more powerful than that is that then they can turn around and say, well, actually, for my team, I want to personalize it in this way, or I want to add in this step of approval, or I want to make this change. Now, by them being involved in that change process, they feel like it's theirs. I built this workflow because I made a change to it. Whatever, it doesn't matter the reasons behind it. They feel like they're involved, and therefore they subscribe to it more, and therefore there's more adoption on that basis. And so the beautiful thing is that as a centralized team, you can build those best practices and then share them in order for your teams to adopt them. So
Nice.
so it didn't sort of answers your question, but sort of doesn't.
Oh, no, no, I mean, it's collaborative, right? So one of the principles and frameworks, right, when you look at within the FinOps community is it, can you democratize, right, what the business objectives are? Can you enable all personas within the organization to lean in and be effective in the community? That's helpful, and that kind of complements into the another topic that we were thinking about in the space of community versus the vendor led types of FinOps, right? So in the space today, right, we continue to see why community first does matter, right? Because ultimately practitioners are builders, right? And so uh, the platforms, the tools that you want to be providing for practitioners really should be about elevating the total organization, not any one specific group. So I think that answers that question, right? Help us understand a bit about how OpenOps then complements really within the FinOps community in working with other, let's say, platforms and solutions like, let's say, like Vega Cloud, or really whether it's an organization that's leaned heavily upon something they've built themselves, or the native tools that are in the space, right? Help us understand how, not only just from like a technical configuration, that's not, again, the integration piece, but more so just the how do you actually implement into an organization that may be already using other types of solutions?
Sure. I just want to also touch on the community point is really why OpenOps had to be and was always going to be open source. Because as it currently stands, an enterprise will use lots of different tooling. I can't remember the exact numbers that you can see, but it's sometimes into the hundreds, and the different number of permutations and different variations that it could be within, not just for thinking about workflows, but just in general. And the number, previously, I think, what was it, 4.1 tools that a FinOps practitioner would use, and that was, I don't know, a year or two ago. So I would imagine it could even be more. But ultimately, the reason that we needed and will always be open source is because we need the community to be able to give different variations and different aspects. Oh, this is what we're doing using this tool, this tool, this tool. We're doing this using this tool, this tool, this tool. And then the beauty of OpenOps is for you to be able to build workflows no matter which tools you're using. So it's really the kind of glue. It's really more of a, we kind of see it as like a programming language. And that's also why, another reason why it's open source, because no successful programming language has ever been behind a paywall. And so we want this to be the de facto standard for building workflows. And to answer your question about the integrations, we have, in each individual partner can build either their own blocks, or we can work with them to build what we call blocks. And ultimately, we already have some of those from various different partners, but it's effectively, exactly as it sounds, a block, which can then enable you to, whether it's pull a recommendation from this block, or pull a this from this block, or pull a CLI from this block, or pull an API call from this. Again, it depends on the different connection, but that's how OpenOps effectively works. And then you can build those blocks with different partners and across different workflows, and then integrate them into our tables, so that you can really kind of fine tune your FinOps processes.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because it goes back to the point you shared earlier in the sense of what's the first problem or challenge, right, that you see organizations, and that is, I've heard for years, on and off, and working with different clients, different size scales, and with different types of solutions. Uh, it seems like a lot of folks are still stuck in that first base of inform, right, where it's uh, most everyone agrees they can figure out pretty quickly how bad things are, or where the pain points are, right? Or where the, I mean, dollars and cents are, but it's a, where do we go from here? I feel that continues to be, again, a challenge in the space. So I think being able to help organizations begin to at least model out how they may want to approach that is certainly something that I think that can progress for folks.
I think, you make a great point, and we become, our minds become trained in certain ways because we've done it in so many times. So one of the interesting things that we're seeing so far, with OpenOps, is that people come in and first and foremost they want to see, like, where's all my cloud spend, where's my visibility dashboard, and we're like, well, we're not a visibility dashboard, so we don't, you can link with your existing or the cloud vendors or whatever, but like, that's not what, people are still like, okay, but where's the dashboard? Or somebody yesterday was talking about uploading a cur to see, like, what for? Like, like, what do you want to upload the cur for? Well, that's how you'd usually, and when you're working with a partner, that's how you'll find out what's going on and get recommendations. Right. Where the workflow automation that syncs with that. And it's actually, we're just so used to doing things in certain ways sometimes that we trained ourselves to think this way, that like the first time we want to evaluate a FinOps tool, we have to upload a cur and upload data and see what happens, as opposed to thinking to ourselves, what are we trying to solve? What do we want to do with the data once we put it in? What do we want to try and solve? How do we want to make this data work for us? How do we, in what kind of process do we want to build to use this data in a good way for us? Because that's also the other thing about OpenOps, is that can take recommendations from any other tool and put it into one central source, so that you have one place where you can see all of your cost optimization opportunities, for example. But then what you could also do is turn around and say, okay, based on the fact that I know my systems and I know what I'm working with, I can build a logic to say, if something is launched using a GP2, ask them why they didn't do it with a GP3 and either automatically change it to a GP3 or get somebody to approve it. But like, you can do those things and you can build them for yourself using the tool if you so desire.
Helpful, and that actually kind of answers a bit of where my next question and kind of topic, and thinking about, okay, real culture change versus someone who says, well, they're giving lip service, right? They say they're doing, or they're doing their best. So what do you think really helps separate teams? And this is in a broader sense, of course, what you guys are doing, uh, but within the context of FinOps, between those that say they're doing it well and those that just say we're doing it right. What are some other indicators you feel that you see that really does separate teams that are being effective in actually making real culture change within FinOps?
It's a great question because there are a lot of organizations that also say they're doing things well, think they're doing things well, and then other parts of the org. We actually had this conversation, I think, at reInvent here about an organization that says how well they're doing, and then in the background they didn't really do chargeback and that kind of stuff. So I think the organizations that are building true collaboration across their teams, that are, being able to bring in personas across engineering and IT and finance, and being able to have these like true business value conversations, getting down deeper into the sort of unit economics of stuff and really truly understanding, what your cloud costs you, and what your cloud makes you. Because the whole idea of FinOps, and not just FinOps, but also why would you leverage the cloud, is for speed, agility, growth, all of these other things. So if it's good money, then you should be spending a lot on your cloud because it's helping your business grow. And so it's understanding how to be just as efficient as possible and bringing as many stakeholders to the table with the same common interests is very powerful. And if you can do that in a succinct way, that's I think then you've got a really good FinOps outfit.
Helpful. And so going maybe up or down a layer, I guess, depending on the organization, where do you feel, what's good advice for, execs wanting to create space where there actually is real financial accountability within engineering org? So until the first piece of that was the cultural element. Can you think of a few examples, or just in general, observationally, how the executives, right, can help create a space where there's some actual real financial accountability for how folks build?
Well, I think it's possibly leaning into things like, green ops, and some of the new initiatives that where they can actually tell. It's I think we've seen over the course of the last 10 years, it's very complicated to get an engineer to get excited about saving his company $5 million, because it's not his $5 million. He doesn't care. His boss doesn't care if he does it. It's very hard to get buy-in for that. And so actually buying into things that, and again, I think it's slightly less in the Americas at this stage than it is in, say, EMEA, but giving somebody that sort of green carrot and suggesting that this is better for the environment, and there's a chance for you to leave a world for your kids behind, and some of the things that we've even noticed already in people that have spoken to us is around, in our notifications, for example, they could be very personalized, and personalizing them with like green leaves and you've just saved 2 trees or whatever. Arguably that's quite appealing to people because it can do things like that. It can create a space where they can, add an extra layer of accountability to people. Because otherwise, the problem, the complex thing goes back to, as we said, it's budgets, and you know uh, that opens up whole other question marks, especially in public sector where they want to retain their budgets, and where if they save money, they don't get as much money the following year. So again, it's a really complex environment, and I think the best way that I can think about it for now is hopefully organizations leaning into greener.
Yeah, and that makes me think, I think of what Anders, the first CloudyCon, FinOps, getting up talking about Spotify and how they went from measuring beers, right? It's a
Yeah.
fun way to gamify, to then equating and saying, the currency of this also objectively ends up being a number of engineers, right, that we can bring in and help build the tool.
Mm.
Uh, I think that was a creative way to go to stage it from a fun collective way to gamify to then also equating it to the net of ensuring that we're able to build and invest back in our teams to be more successful is always one that stood out. And then as time has gone on, people measure whether it's by an Uber or a Lyft for their swipes or rides. It could be a measurement back to whatever their output is, and then also showing it how it directly impacts the team is a really fun, creative way too.
I agree. I think that collaboration is really the only way. And
Yeah, it's fun and creative.
Mhm.
Super helpful. The last one on thinking about culture and again impact. What advice would you give for whether it's folks in the alliances in the partner space? What are the good things that you're seeing effective to really help their organization lean in and working with, it is particularly the CSPs. What are some of the things that you're seeing as just wanting to being a good partner, a good steward in the CSP ecosystems that you feel are effective and helpful today for organizations?
Well, I think that it's interesting to watch as they each have new things coming out, different programs. I think the latest concern that people have is around the implications of where they actually build based on. The cloud vendors now sort of coming in and saying, oh, well, you have to be, in certain cases, you have to be built on AWS, for example, in order to get certain credits, or you have to go through the buy with AWS scheme and stuff. And I think that there's a definite play between the cloud vendors to be again, to be that originating source of I don't know how to say this correctly actually, but like the being the place that not just a place that you buy through, but also the place that you build on, and being like really almost the all-encompassing cloud vendor. I think these conversations are coming back again. I feel like they were around almost like 8 to 10 years ago, and then everyone sort of spread across multi-cloud quite a little bit. But now I think that there's this kind of play to bring everything back in again. There's a lot going on. There's also across the course of the next few weeks, we'll see the rules around shared RIs and that kind of stuff coming in, which will affect resellers as well. So that's again slightly different to the question that you asked. The CSP side of things, it's again, I think they're really pushing in for the commits are going up incredibly, and so they're putting on new programs all the time. It's just I don't know. I still find it amazing that we've come. Like I said, I've been in this for 12, 13 years, and I remember talking to companies spending just tens of millions of dollars that are now up to hundreds of millions of dollars, and still not even scratching the surface. So pretty wild.
Yeah, no, well, it ebbs and flows, right? And I think, yeah, and kind of follow on that point is organizations just as they get better about how they measure how impactful they are into using their public cloud, they should be able to determine and move the needle on the spectrum of what is that? Is that an 80/20? Is that a 90/10? Is that an all-in investment on just one? I think everyone objectively they should be getting to a point where they can at least they have the controls to move where that dial is on right and how they type want to. And I think we're going to continue to see that. Yeah, I still, I mean, yeah, we now have, $1 billion consumers of CSPs,
Hmm. Hmm.
so, I do continue to find it interesting how, I still hear similar stories that I was hearing back in 2015, 16, 17. Different players sometimes, different complexity. But yeah, to your point, I think it's, to be successful, in those, it's understanding, uh, each one of those CSPs, what are the additional tools that they're gonna be able to provide for you, as you lean in and make those commitments, whether it's again to discounts for consumption that they're committing to, or it's the design and build types of products that they use. those are all pieces that folks have to put together. But I think that it continues to ebb and flow, which is
Very much so.
really interesting. So any closing remarks or anything? I mean, I think just to highlight the takeaways, right? From our side of seeing how impactful you guys can be from a workflow automation standpoint. I like how you complement really the community in looking at it from entering it in as being something broader than uh, being as a vendor-led type of FinOps platform. I think that's great. And then I like how the design of what you guys are doing really impacts the more of the culture to change, as opposed to kind of the status norm of what has become a very, really, you can certainly say, a noisy space. Those are again the topics I felt like were good to highlight for you guys. Yeah, closing remarks, things that you would like to kind of share with folks and take away as well from our discussion.
Yeah, I guess I'd love people to come and try OpenOps, that's for sure. Um, but largely because one of the things that we really are focusing on is elevating the FinOps game. So we want people to be able to come in and build workflows, and then the community aspect is where they can either share it or ask for help, or help build workflows with others, because the workflows themselves are entirely shareable. So you can build your own personal libraries, or you can share them with others. But the idea is that, who knows, maybe you want to one day present at reInvent how you saved X company $20 million. You'll show how you did it in the workflow. And by being able to do that, you can really start to have a more level 300 or 400 level conversations about how you actually achieve these things. This is the process that we went through. This is how we built this out in order to achieve X goal. And this is how we achieved it, and this is how we automated it. For me, that's exactly why we want the community. So I would just encourage the community to come and join in, and be ask questions and be inquisitive, because the goal is to raise and elevate the FinOps game. With us, for us all together, ultimately,
Oh, yeah.
and also to use Vega.
Shameless plug there at the end.
Yeah, totally
Nice.
shameless.
No, that's awesome. So obviously at your website, any other direct locations to land for folks to learn more? What's your
So yeah, so we have the GitHub, which is GitHub OpenOps Cloud, or we have the Slack, which is slack.openops.com, or just quite simply our website, which is openops.com as well.
cool, cool,
Yeah.
great. Anything exciting and new we should be watching for here in the near future?
Well, we do have some exciting releases this week, where we are releasing our very early version of our AI pilot. So from this week, you'll be able to bring your own AI into the tool, which means that you'll be able to query some of the workflows and that type of stuff. So we're pretty excited about that. And then general release will be at reInvent. Sorry, not at reInvent, at FinOps X. So that's just a few weeks away, and we'll be looking forward to sharing some great times with not just Vega, but everyone from the FinOps community that we'll have the opportunity to spend some time with.
No, that's awesome. That's great to hear. Yeah, on folks interested, obviously continue to learn more at vegacloud.io. We are excited and working through in the future of doing work with OpenOps. So look forward to hearing more from that perspective. But Lee, always great to chat. 19 days and counting as we march towards X. We'll look forward to seeing you and the rest of the group. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Stephen. Can't wait to see you there.
All right. Cheers. Thanks all.
Cheers.